Hello, my dear boys and girls, and welcome again back to this video lesson. As I promised you, I speak today again on Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens using some slides made by Zanichelli. So it's time to give some complementary information about him, and we reduce my screen to pass to the screen by Zanichelli. Here we are. So this is Charles Dickens, and we know he was born 1812, 1870 when he died. And we don't want to give much information about his life because you already know it and you can read from your books. We just remember the fact that he moved from Portsmouth, where he was born, and after difficult life because of his father's financial problems, he moved to London, where he attended a school, and he learned handwriting, shorthand, in other words, and he became his activity as a reporter. Newspaper reporter with the name by Botts. And in 1836 he collected all these articles in a book called Sketches by Botts. Botts was the nickname used by him, and this was a great experience because it gave him the possibility to get in touch and to understand, to study a variety of characters that then he presented in his novels. About this slide, we have to say the core of what I wanted you to focus. First of all, how Dickens' literary career is divided. Dickens' literary career is divided into main parts. The first part when he was younger, and the second part when he was more mature. In the first part of his literary career, he had a certain behavior in which, by which he denounced the terrible aspects of the life of his main protagonists, such as Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, and Little Dorrit. These novels are called autobiographical because they reflect the life of Dickens himself and the difficulty he himself experienced in his life. These three novels became the symbols of an exploited childhood. The second block is Bleak House, Hard Times, Great Expectation. And Charles Dickens wrote these novels in the second part of his literary career. When he had become richer, he had not to ask anything to the society, and he could express himself more freely. In fact, these are called social novels. But what is the difference in style? Because both have got something in common. Both describe the bad condition of life of the main protagonists. What makes them different is the way Charles Dickens analyzed and dealt with them. In the first part, he used some features which may be summed up as a lot of humorous aspects, melodramatic aspects, and all the story end in a happy end, have a happy ending. This means that this reminds us about Shakespeare when in his third period of his literary career, I'm referring to Shakespeare now, wrote the dark comedies. Comedies are usually happy. They are made to entertain, and so they make people laugh. Well, those comedies were called the dark or bitter comedies because they had nothing less than tragedies. So the same is for Dickens. Dickens used a humorous style, a comic style, melodramatic style, and happy endings, but the content of the novels in this first part is always dramatic. Anyway, but why did Charles Dickens use this strategy, this way of writing? Because he never forgot that he belonged to the middle class, and he was writing for the middle class. And the potential readers of his novels and the readers of his novels were the middle class. So they couldn't accept a writer who wrote about them in a negative way. That's why he chose a sort of mediation, and he used this strategy. On the contrary, when his life was, how can I say, well-to-do, and he lived in a good condition, he abandoned this style, and his way of writing became harder, became more real, and he denounced, not explicitly, but implicitly, the atrocity, the contradiction, the absurdity of the contemporary life. In fact, Bleak House speaks about the law and the terrible condition of the legal system, and he wanted a reform of the law in England. At times denounced the monotonous life of the poor workers who had to live every day the same thing. And so we have got time and occasion to analyze this better. And finally, Great Expectation, which analyzes the life of the main protagonist, which is a young boy, and he has to live some bad experience, but in the same way, Charles Dickens proved to be a great storyteller, and in fact he described characters of this novel in a very beautiful way. So what we should also say, I don't remember if I have already said the Victorian Compromise. What is the Victorian Compromise? If you remember well, it was that general tone of satisfaction and optimism that had the middle class. They tended to consider their age a positive one, ignoring, or because they wanted to ignore, the real troubles of the poor classes. Well, if in an ideal collocation of these two blocks of rye or of books, of novels by Dickens, we can say that the first Dickens is more close to the Victorian Compromise, and that the second one is very far from the Victorian Compromise. So I don't want to say that he embraced the Victorian Compromise in the first part, because he was completely beside the poor people and the weak people. Anyway, what about the setting? The setting, we have to say that it was London, and we have already said that. But this slide gives us also three different social levels of London. The parochial world, for example, the workhouse where Oliver Twist lived, and it is inhabited by the lower middle classes, but also by poor people. The criminal world, that is populated, crowded by murderers, thieves, criminals, pickpocketers living in squalid slums, and finally the Victorian middle class, that were respectable people that believed in human dignity, but they didn't give any any sign to take into consideration the human dignity of the poor people. In all of this picture, we can say that he always put into evidence slum districts, and the most famous one was Seven Dials, in which there is a sense of disorientation and confinement, which expressed all the position and the bitterness of Charles Dickens. What about characters? About the characters, we have already said that he never invented types. The characters, he created so many characters, but they were always individuals. They never reached the position or the qualification of types. The third point of this slide tells us that he created characters which belong to the Victorian society in all its variety. So, putting characters which belonged to the rich class, but also people who lived in the squalor, and we have already said all this. But, moreover, we have to add that all his characters, when he creates these characters, are caricatures. In other words, he exaggerated and ridiculed particular symbols of the society, of the middle class, but also of the lower classes. And also, why not, he spoke and created also weak female characters. On a way or another, as I have said before, he was always near the poor, near the outcast. In other words, he was always in favor of the poor, of the working class, just because he had experienced all that, and also because he was a man of good sense. Anyway, about themes. Well, there are many, but the most important is family. The other one is childhood and poverty. Dickens' children are innocent, are always innocent, but in the beginning, because they are always corrupted by adults. And so sometimes they are innocent, or sometimes are already corrupted by adults. Anyway, most of the children started their story in negative and terrible circumstances, but they always rise to happy endings, particularly in the first part, because we are referring to the first part of his literary production, and which resolve the contradiction in their lives that are created by the adult world. Okay, we don't speak about the aims. We stop here. I hope to have told you important things about Charles Dickens. Next lesson will be about either Oliver Twist or Hard Times. In a way or another, we analyzed both of them. I have to choose. I invite you to give me your feedback on the platform We School. And thanks for your attention. See you next lesson. Have a good time. Bye-bye.